Hey guys, today we are going to be talking about finding the right shade of foundation. Do you ever struggle trying to find the right shade of foundation? You think you know everything you need to know about it, but yet it's not that easy. Well, first of all, it's not your fault. So know that it is not your fault. The problem is there are probably thousands of variations in skin tone out there in the world, and the makeup manufacturers can only make so many shades. Some make more shades than others, but yeah, diversity is the key word, I think, for this decade. It's tough because, like I said, the makeup manufacturers, they can only make so many shades, and the more shades they make, the more it's going to cost them, and the more they're going to have to charge and then pass the price along, the cost along to you. So, what can you do? Well, it all depends. If you found a foundation that you really love, that you think suits you, then you're ahead of the game. But the problem with that is new is what these brands focus on. They're always coming out with new things. So even if you found the perfect foundation and the perfect shade for you personally, chances are it's not going to be around in a few years, and then you'll have to go through that all over again. So I'm going to give you some advice and some useful information about things that you can do to help you if you are trying to find the right thing. Okay, so today's video is not going to be about finding the right formula. Different people like different things. I've noticed that when companies make new foundations now, they tend to make it either matte or dewy or long lasting. Yes, I injured my finger this morning. They make it matte, dewy, or long lasting, and I don't feel like most people necessarily want either strictly matte or strictly dewy, because if you have a matte formula, sometimes it can be a bit drying, and if you have a dewy formula, it's going to emphasize pores and fine lines. So really what I think most of us want is something that is going to be a combination of the two. And as far as long lasting goes, that would be great for somebody who's oily, but not for somebody who's dry. So first you need to find the right foundation formula for you. And just because it's labeled with all those buzzwords that I just said, doesn't mean it's necessarily even going to be what you think it's going to be. Good example of that is the Wet n Wild Photofocus Dewy Foundation. Even though this is allegedly a dewy formula, I find it to be fine in terms of not emphasizing pores or fine lines. And then the Maybelline Fit Me Matte and Poreless, even though it's a matte formula, it's not drying on my skin, and my skin is normal to dry, and I don't find it to be a formula that dries out my skin. So first you have to find a formula that works for you, but I want the focus on today's video to be finding the right shade, okay? So if you can find one that matches you perfect, great. The Wet n Wild one that I just showed you, the shade that works for me is Rose Ivory, because I have pink undertones, I have cool tone skin, so Rose Ivory is perfect for me. It's the right tone and it's the right depth of color, which is kind of surprising that I'm able to find a match, because I'm not fair and I'm not light. I'm somewhere in the middle. And when they market these things and develop them, they tend to put people into the category of fair, light, medium, deep. And then they might throw in a few extras in between, but very rarely. And then they usually do tones that are cool, warm, or neutral. So the shades that they come up with are a combination of those. It is somewhat difficult for me to find foundations a lot of times because the majority of the world's people are warm tone. So if you're a makeup manufacturer, it would make sense for you to develop more shades that are warm tone because there aren't as many people out there that are cool tone. And if you're cool tone and you have a deeper skin tone, good luck. Because what I've noticed with shade ranges is that once you get into the deeper shades, they assume that everybody that is a deeper skin tone is warm tone. And that's not necessarily the case. You can be warm tone, you can be a deeper skin tone and still be cool tone. It is possible. So it's tough. It's really tough. One of the tips that I'm going to give you today is going to work for everybody except for the people who are the fairest of the fair and the deepest of the deep. And that is that if you can't find a shade in a certain brand, like let's say you found a brand that you like their formula. For example, with me, Maybelline Fit Me Matte and Poreless. I like this formula a lot. Even though it's matte, it's not drying on me like I said before. But the problem is they do not make a shade in this that is perfect for me. So I have to mix two shades. And I know that is a pain in the neck, but if you really like a formula and it's affordable enough, it might be worth your while to buy 2 bottles and mix it. Now, you're not necessarily going to do half and half when you mix it. You're just going to have to play around with it and figure out which one you're going to need the most of to get your perfect match. For example, this is what I have on today. I custom blended these 2 bottles together to get my perfect color. Because like I said, I'm not fair, I'm not light, I'm somewhere in the middle. So this shade right here is 105 Fair Ivory. And this is the fair cool tone shade in the line. And then this one is 122 Creamy Natural. And this is the light cool shade in the line. And as you can see, there is a world of difference between these 2 colors. I mean, this one is really light and this one is pretty dark. But when I mix these 2 together in the right quantities, this is what I get. This is what I have on. And you can see that it's a good match. I mean, I don't have foundation on right here, but yet it matches me pretty well. And if you look at my wrist and my hand and stuff, it's a pretty good match. Now, keep in mind when you're doing this, if you go this path and you want to do this, some foundations oxidize. So what does that mean? When something oxidizes, that means that it looks one color when you apply it, and then when the air hits it and it's been sitting on your skin for a little while, it's going to deepen up and get darker. So you'll have to play around with it and figure out if it's a formula that oxidizes. I don't find this particular foundation to oxidize. I think it stays pretty true. So just a heads up on that. Now, with the Wet n Wild Photofocus, I don't have to mix anything. This Rose Ivory one works for me, fortunately. But this does oxidize a little bit, so the color that you see in the bottle, it does deepen up. I would say like a shade darker than what you see here, because you might be thinking, oh, that's way too light for her. Why is she saying that works for her? Because it oxidizes. If you are my skin tone, fair/light, cool tone, I'm just gonna show you a few other foundations that work for me personally, just to kind of help you out if you're not crazy about either one of those formulas. In Revlon Color Stay, I'm the shade Buff. In the NYX Born to Glow, I'm the shade Light. In the e.l.f. Flawless Finish, I'm the shade Beige. In Colourpop Pretty Fresh, I'm the shade 33C. In the Colourpop Stick Foundation, I'm the shade Light 55C. And in Profusion, I have to mix the Fair 3 and the Light 3. Now, some of these brands put information on the back of the container that is going to really help you determine what shade you're going to be. Like with the Profusion one, it says Fair 3, but then underneath that it says Cool Pink. So if you know your undertone, that's going to be super helpful. And then the other one is Light 3, and that also says Cool Pink. But the other shades in the line most likely say Warm Yellow or Warm Peach, or you know, they'll have a description on there that will be suited to you personally. The e.l.f. one, it says right on the back underneath the shade name, it says Cool Pink Undertones. But not every brand does that. That would be so awesome if they did. The Colourpop ones, if you go on their website, they will actually narrow it down for you and tell you which are the best shades for you. You just click on either fair, light, medium, or deep, and then you click on your undertone, and it's, in my case, I use the light ones, and that works for me. But if it was a different brand, it could be a little bit too dark. But the Colourpop ones run a little bit on the light side, so I can get away with that. And by the way, with the NYX Born to Glow, I was at Target yesterday looking for something, and I happened to see that this was on clearance. So I think this might be being discontinued, which is a shame because this is a beautiful foundation. So that's either Target is not going to be carrying it anymore, or NYX is discontinuing it, one or the other. And then with the Wet n Wild Photofocus, the original formula that's not dewy, I think that is in the process of being discontinued too, because I've seen the original one that's more of a matte formula. I've seen that on clearance in a lot of places too. Now, as far as like trying to find your perfect shade and mixing and all that, you would think that it would be fairly straightforward, but keep in mind that not every store is going to carry every shade of what you need. I went on the hunt yesterday. I already had the 122 Creamy Beige, but I was on the hunt for the 105 Fair Ivory to mix with the other one, and I cannot tell you how many stores I had to go to find what I was looking for. If I'd known it was going to be that much of a struggle, I just would have ordered it online. I didn't think it was going to be any big deal, but either it was out of stock, the 105 Fair Ivory, either it was out of stock or the store didn't carry that shade. So finally, big thank you to Walmart, because they were the only ones that had the shade and had it in stock. So thank you. Which is fun. It's so ironic though, because usually the shelves aren't really stocked that well at Walmart, but yesterday they were. They must have just stocked it or something, because they had more than one bottle on the shelf of that shade that I needed. But I have one of those, let me go get it so I can show you what I'm talking about. Okay, I have one of these artist palette things with the spatula that I use to mix the foundation. And this is nice because it has the wells in it. It's kind of a pain to clean though, because it's metal. But if it was plastic, it could stain. So I understand why they made it out of metal. But I just put like a little bit of each color into adjacent wells and then mix it together. And I used about I would say for a ratio, I used 3/4 of the fair ivory and about 1/4 of the creamy beige to get exactly the right color. But yeah, you'd have to kind of play around with that, the ratio, to find your right shade. I got this at Primark, and I know that most people don't have Primark stores in their area. There's only a handful of them in the United States, but I have also seen these at, where did I see them? Forever 21, but they're kind of like going out of business too. There's not many of those left anymore. You don't have to have anything special. You can do it on the back of your hand. You can do it on a plate. If you go into the craft section of stores, you can find something like this probably for people who paint and stuff like that. You could probably find one that was not that expensive. They may even have something like that at like Michael's or Joann's or a store like that. Or any store that has a craft section might have something like that. But hopefully I've given you some useful information that would be helpful in finding your right shade, but it's not easy. Some brands, you're just not going to be able to use that brand because I can think of a lot of brands right off the top of my head that I can't wear because my skin does have that pink undertone and they just don't make a foundation with a pink undertone. Or they think they do, but then I'll look at the line and everything looks super yellow, even though it'll say for cool toned light skin or something like that. I'll pick it up and look at it and it's super yellow. It's like, no, I can't wear that, you know, unless maybe I mix it with a foundation in another brand, which I don't want to do because I don't want to mix brands with each other because the ingredients may not mesh together or be compatible. So yeah, be careful with that. Try to stick within a brand itself if you're going to start mixing because yeah, you don't want to end up with some sort of chemical reaction or something. But yeah, there's just going to be brands that you may not be able to wear. They might be too yellow, they might be too pink. And one last tip I want to give you is you're going to see some brands that label things as a peach undertone. That is very confusing and deceptive because the color peach is actually a warm color, but some brands label that as a cool undertone, so you might be able to get away with it, but if you have a cool tone and you buy something with a peach undertone, you might be able to get away with it, you might not. You're just going to have to try it. If you're somebody who doesn't mind buying high-end brands, you can get a sample, but of course you can't do that with drugstore brands, and that's why I was trying to focus on explaining about mixing and so forth. Oh, at the very beginning of the video, I touched upon something and then I didn't even go into what I was trying to say. If you are trying to find your right shade, you first need to establish what your undertone is. And then when you look at the foundations in a brand's line, you want to try to narrow down which two categories are you going to need. In my case, I needed fair and light that was cool tone, okay? So you're going to want to go one category lighter and one category darker than what you need, unless they have exactly what you are, you know, and this only applies to people that are in between categories. But once you narrow it down, then you can go ahead and mix. And the reason why I said that it's not going to work for somebody who is the fairest of the fair or the deepest of the deep is because you won't be able to go one shade lighter if you're the fairest of the fair, and you won't be able to go one shade darker if you're the deepest of the deep. So you see what I'm saying? So if you're in between, you just need to buy one from each category within the tone that you need. And you might be thinking, well, how do I know? How do I know which ones? This is where If you go on the brand's website, sometimes you can get that information. Sometimes it's printed right on the bottle. But if it isn't, like it's not with the Maybelline. It doesn't say anything on here about what tone these are. But sometimes you can get that information from the brand's website, and sometimes you can get that information from a store's website. They'll actually have things on there. Ulta is a good one for that. If you go on Ulta's website and click on a foundation that you're interested in, not all, but some of them will tell you which ones are cool toned, which ones are warm toned, which ones are neutral. And then if you still can't find the information that you want, because like I said, it isn't on there for every single brand, then you can go to something like a foundation matrix or foundation finder. There are websites out there that will help you specifically identify which foundations will suit your needs. Although some of those I don't feel like they're that helpful because they don't update them as much as they should. And there's, I'm not going to point fingers, but there's a couple websites out there that are like that. And the foundations that they're recommending don't even exist anymore because things are constantly changing. Companies are discontinuing things in their line and coming out with new things, and then the people who run those websites aren't updating the information as fast as they need to or can. So yeah, you may be limited in that. But I think once you start looking at, once you know what your undertone is and you start looking at the foundations, eventually you're going to have an image in your mind of exactly what you need. Or if you already have one that matches you, use that as a guide. Like this matches me, but this isn't a good example because this oxidizes. So if you have a foundation that matches you that doesn't oxidize, you can use that as a guide. But with me, I kind of have this image in my mind of what I know the foundation is kind of going to need to look like. But yeah, you won't be able to find a perfect match in every brand. So you will, someday you're going to find a foundation that you love, and you're going to want to get involved in this mixing business. So best of luck. And I hope that some of this was helpful to you. And if you enjoyed this video and you did find it helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.